What is up, you savages? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm your host, Dan Tom, analyst whose work you can find over at MMAJunkie.com. But on this here program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA, and in a bit of a different way. We do our breakdown shows. We break down the action of the weekend's fight cards, as there's usually a plethora. But not to timestamp these shows too much. Obviously, the times we are in the year of 2020 and COVID-19, the coronavirus, yes, sure we're all tired of hearing about it, but those are the times we're in. So thankfully, this program has another form of entertainment that we can lean on. A form of entertainment I've been wanting to get back to, which is the top 5 shows. Top 5, it's something that everybody does. It's a concept we're all familiar with, and how we apply it here on this show is that we essentially will pick a history topic in MMA with a co-host who I have with me today, and we will dive deep. And that co-host, one of my favorite co-hosts, one of the co-hosters with the mostest, because he is a hostess himself. He's got the experience. He's got a much more talent than me. So it's good to have him back on. That is Jordan Killion at JYork87 on Twitter.
Yo, dude, you called me a hostess like I work at Chili's.
You know...
No, I mean, I would.
You know, I never really thought about that. The hostess with the mostest, you really can kind of turn that around, can't you? Because, that is like, what the heck?
Is everybody in your party here? I'm sorry, I can't seat you yet then.
By the way, me and Jordan are both just not hot enough to have scored those roles. I say that, Jordan, because I don't know about you, but you're looking in the tipping industry, at least, I don't know how it is in Chicago. Obviously, it's an industry town as well, but Vegas, a particular industry town, right? And I'm like, man, I'm looking at busboy jobs and waiter jobs. I'm like, I want the hostess job. You just stand there, you look pretty.
That's the cushion.
You get hit on by a bunch of creepy dudes, and you go home.
That may not be a perk, but
yeah,
I get you. Like, it is always a super easy job, but I think in my experience, they always give it to really young kids, yes. Like 16-year-olds and stuff like that. So it's not too much to overwhelm them. One of my favorite things I've ever seen happen though is one time this 16 or 17-year-old girl had just had it with this Janet boomer that was trying to get seated, and she kept coming up and asking when is our table ready? And the lady was like, the girl was like, ma'am, do you want to look at this book? Let me show you this book. She was like, no. I'm sorry. I don't want. And she's like, no. Here, look at this book. And so she pulled the thing out. She was like, your name's right here. She's like, they have to get a seat, and then they have to get a seat. And after them, then you get a seat. And it was just great to see this 17-year-old totally dressed down this 55-year-old entitled lady. It was awesome.
Dude, that reminds me of a comedy sketch, but I feel like, I don't know about you, Jordan, have you been overly watching Netflix that everything's starting to bleed together? Because that totally reminds me of another story that was funny, but no, I don't know.
I am the Tiger King at this point.
Oh my God, that was my mistake. I stayed up too late watching, going down that rabbit hole, and I'm not going to be a spoiler person because, kind of like I said on my last live chat, I feel like spoilers have been worse in this generation in general, Jordan. Yeah. But now quarantine time, now everybody's getting around to watch stuff, which is cool and good for you. And I'm not trying to rain on the parade. But my goodness, are things getting spoiled left and right on podcasts if you're not up to date right now during quarantine time.
I know, man. I've had to really catch myself a couple times because Tiger King I was good on, but I started listening to a podcast yesterday, and they I forget, I don't even remember what they were talking about, but it was a new show that had just recently come out in the last week or so. They were already spoiling it, and it was Westworld. They were already talking about the second episode of Westworld, which had just aired Sunday, and I was like, I haven't watched it yet. Fucking chill.
Yeah, I know, and it's funny because there was something I was watching on Tiger King. I'm like, ooh, this is good because it's not a spoiler, and it's totally MMA kind of centric, and it's something weird that me and Jordan would totally riff on. And now I can't remember it for the life of me, but I think I'm 4 episodes in, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the wild ride because, again, it's about characters. I appreciate characters. You don't have to agree with them, but you know what I'm saying. I don't agree with Trump, not to get political or anything. I'm not near that side, but at the same time, I don't hate the guy to the point where it'll ruin my day. I can actually laugh at his stupidity. Now I don't agree with it, but again, it's
he looked at an eclipse. It's that's objectively hilarious. You should be able to sit there and laugh at something like that,
right? Because people will see me reacting to it, whom I live with or family, friends, or whatever, and they'll be like, "What, you like that?" I'm like, "No, I'm just laughing at the stupidity and madness of it all."
Come on, it's funny. You should be able to take yourself out of a situation and be able to laugh at stuff.
And to tether it back into MMA, we have characters like that, right? For example, I actually wasn't a big fan of The Diaz brothers. When I first saw Nick Diaz fighting Sean Shirk back in the day at UFC 56 or 58, I'm like, who's this disrespectful dude flipping off the camera? But kind of like I posted on my Twitter timeline, I did a little flashback to the Diaz Condit Primetime episode 1 where they're talking to the teacher, and you're like getting a more of a glimpse of like who Nick Diaz is. And again, you still don't have to agree with him, but you're like, okay, I get it a little more. I get it.
Yeah, I think I was like the last person on earth to come around to the Diaz brothers. Like it was pretty recent where I was like, like I appreciate that they're good and like talented and like good for the sport, but like never been into them. But like pretty like within the last maybe 6 months, I've kind of turned the corner, and now I'm like, don't be scared, homie.
Totally, right. No. So at least I don't feel alone on that, because I feel like it was blasphemy to say anything like negative about the Diaz brothers. Like what, bro?
I know their fans are very big. This is a whole tangent on its own, so I'm sorry. Stop me if I'm going too far off base here. There's a video. I want to say it's probably 6 or 7 years old. It's a YouTube video. It's like of this dude who gets in a car accident, and he's like pretty messed up, like he's bleeding. He may have some head trauma, and he's just spouting off Diaz brothers quotes like into the camera.
Yes. Fuck
like,
man.
Yeah, he's like, what the fuck is going on? This guy just like totaled his vehicle, needs to be in the hospital, and he's like, don't be scared, homie.
Diaz 209, motherfucker.
Diaz,
yeah, it was great. It was like it reminded me of like what's his name, Jason Nightlight. Not to rhyme, but that's the dude look like. By the way, we're like 8 minutes in. I don't think I've even given the listeners here the topic we're tackling. Top 5 crowd reactions, which I got a shout out to like I said in the live chat. Brad from the MMA Analysis podcast. He actually recommended this to me, like not even like a week ago, and I'm like, that's a good one. I'll put it in the topic pool, and I was going back and forth with Jordan. This one popped out, and we're like, yeah, let's tackle it. So, Jordan, obviously, as you know more than most topics. There's no hard and fast rules in this podcast, right? The lunatics kind of run the asylum. Being different or taking an alternate take is not discouraged at all. But how did you approach a topic that is essentially kind of general, right? I mean, top 5 crowd reactions in MMA.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of, as I was making my list, I kind of narrowed myself into one lane, but there is a little bit of spread as far as like, because you're going to get different types of reactions throughout the whole event. So like it was hard for me to pinpoint like what counts. And I feel like anytime you've got a crowd in an MMA environment and they are reacting, it should count. So I think it's a pretty broad topic.
I agree. You know, kind of like I said on the tweet, when I tweet out these shows, by the way, at the PYN podcast, if you want to follow that, or just follow me on Twitter at DanTomMMA. It's like, pretty much comes down to like crowd reactions, whether it's like, chants, memorable ones, questionable chants, right? Altercations in some cases, maybe, who knows? Yeah. To just obviously memorable moments, whether they bled through the screen or there could be some bias in your list or mine. I know we both have, been to our fair share of MMA shows, which is fair to say, and a lot of those times, those stories make the list. And you don't even have to be at an MMA show, but in general, a lot of these picks can have a strong personal bias, and that's okay so long as there's a story behind it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I tried not to put any personal picks from like people yelling at me at shows, because that's happened. Fighters' families yelling at me, stuff like that. But I didn't put any of that stuff in there. I'm not trying to air dirty laundry. So
well okay, that's I have to ask you off air. But we all know my favorite crowd reaction that Jordan Killion got, and it was not at a UFC fight. It was at a Buffalo Wild Wings when Tito beat Bader.
Yeah, that was that guy. I'm pretty sure that guy was ready to stand up, scream Trump 2020, even though he didn't know it was going to happen yet, and beat the shit out of me at that moment.
And it really is a great story. So just quickly for the audience, can you recap what happened there at that Buffalo Wild Wings when Bader?
I mean the long and short of it was I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings by myself watching the Tito versus Bader fight, and along the bar where I was sitting was a bunch of like real stereotypical early aughts MMA bros wearing their full afflictioned out Extreme Couture stuff. No offense, love all the guys.
No worries. Yep.
But just flaming Ed Hardy shirts and all everything you'd ever expect someone to look like. They're all older than me, probably in their 40s at the time. Huge Tito fans, right? Rooting for Tito, and I'm like, there is no fucking way that Tito Ortiz is going to beat Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader is going to take him down, beat the bejesus out of him on the ground. It's going to be over. So I'm like, these guys are chatting really loud, and I'm like, well, I mean, just watch. Bader's going to take this guy down and beat the stuff out of him. Tito's past his prime. Obviously, we all know what happens. Tito drops Bader with a jab and chokes him out, and that guy absolutely rubbed every inch of everything in my face that I was wrong. And he was about ready to take his shirt off and start flexing at me. So it was basically a group of 20, 45-year-old MMA bros just ready to beat me up because I was wrong about Bader and Tito.
I'm pretty much picturing a bunch of dudes who look like a mix of Tiger King and one of his boyfriends with the tap-out tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. They may have been like small-town cops. I don't know.
That is great. Can we just collectively agree before we move on that like that is the worst when the MMA gods validate those fans and those views?
I know. It's a real bummer. It doesn't happen too often, but man, that was one where I was eating crow for a long time.
All right, folks, forgive us here for being a little self-indulgent with this banter, but hey, we're all going through this quarantine together, so there was a bit of and me and Jordan, we're actually friends and enjoy talking to each other, so hopefully you guys don't mind the small talk, but yes, we did not lose sight of the target. We are going to, as I say on my podcast, stay on target, a little Star Wars reference there, but we're going to stay on target here and do our top 5 MMA crowd reactions. I'm really looking forward to this one. At the end, we'll get the submissions in transition, honorable mentions. But, of course, for those who aren't aware, we're going to go from 5 to 1, going back and forth. Jordan, why don't you kick off the program? You know how this format works.
Yeah.
What was your number 5? Number 5 is always an interesting number.
Yeah, 5's always interesting because it's like right on the chopping room floor, so it's like hard to distinguish what's the first honorable mention and what's number 5. But for me, this one has a little bit of bias to it just because it's a guy that I always really loved watching fight, and so a huge reaction for him. I picked at my number 5 spot. I put UFC 83 when GSP fought in Montreal against Matt Serra for the second time. Just the pop that he gets from the crowd when, as soon as, like, because there's already a lot of hype going into it. It's in Montreal. He's the hometown guy. And then as soon as the crowd sees him in that red gi with the headband, it goes up on the big screen. Man, they lose it. It's definitely, it gives me chills thinking about it, honestly. I just watched it this morning because I was like flipping through some things this morning trying to figure out what I wanted to put in the top 5. And man, that one, like, and he just, everything about GSP in that fight seemed like different. He was so focused. He had really stripped down his training to just training. He kind of got rid of the entourage and all that stuff after the Sarah knockout. So man, that's just it's a really cool one. If you haven't seen it in a long time, do yourself a favor. There's a really good YouTube video, high quality. Go watch it because the crowd's already there's a pretty good element of just ambient noise. Like people are excited. There's tension in the air, and then as soon as like the music's going, it's getting hyped up, and then bam, they show him in that bright red gi with the dope ass samurai headband, and like that place just loses it. So that's my number 5.
That's a great one, man. That ties with 2 honorable mentions. One I'll save for later, and another one was one of mine that I was going to compare it to, but it was a much weaker comparison and much weaker than anything that was on the list. But South Korea, when they went there for the first time for UFC Fight Night 79, when they went there for Benson Henderson and Jorge Masvidal, and just even from like the opening prelims, like what do you Glenn from The Walking Dead, Dong Young Ma just getting slam KO'd, like you just heard like just the crowd, and it reminded me of what that must have sounded like. But
he does look like Stephen Yeun now.
Yeah, he does. Poor guy. He really, and he got the same kind of beatings too. But let's not go there. Speaking of spoilers, but no. Obviously, your example's so much better to the fact that I'll say this, Jordan. You tell me if you sign off on this. If you had the MMA time machine to go back to certain MMA crowds, I would. And I won't get too deep into it in case it ties in with any lists. But I would take the Bell Center crowd, specifically for that fight when George is getting the first takedown of the fight, over the record-setting, I believe it was Rogers Center, UFC 129. I'll take that one over the Montreal crowd over that.
Yeah, man, it was crazy because obviously it's his hometown, so it's amped up to begin with. But then it's also like George kind of seemed like this was right at the start of his like, man, this guy might be one of the best. Like,
Dude.
people are starting to think like he could be, he's beaten Matt Hughes at this point, and like, because he had that fluke knockout, or I don't want to call it fluke, not to take anything away from Matt Serra.
Right.
He lands a big shot. Serra lands a big shot. He winds up winning that fight. And so it's like, oh man, I don't know what's happened. But then he comes back and dominates Koscheck, beats Matt Hughes, and then coming into this fight, he's the interim champ, going up to kind of unify the belt. Man, it was, that atmosphere is wild. And then that kind of starts that trajectory of arguably one of the best runs in MMA history.
He's still the best resume for my money is George St. Pierre. And that time was awesome because it was like this 3-horse race for the greatest pound-for-pound fighters. Mm-hmm. You had BJ amidst his lightweight run. And Anderson, it was even before he kind of delivered the stinkers with Maia or Leites. And so he was well amid the prime of his run. That was a special time in MMA if you were following. All right, that's a good one. My number 5, the one I ended up siding with, like you said, number 5 is an interesting number because it's a chopping block. And for me, especially people, familiar with our top 5 shows, if old hipster Dan Tom's going to go hipster or something really random, or I'll usually throw it in the number 5 spot. That's what I did here. And usually, maybe because I'm a bit of a contrarian, or I don't know where this rule comes from, but I know plenty of other people that kind of do similar things where recency bias we acknowledge by almost shunning recent things that happen. And seldom, I don't want to timestamp these lists, but seldom will you see me, for example, put something within 6 to 8 months of it happening, on my list. I couldn't avoid it here, Jordan, because it was a crowd reaction. The crowd got creative. It took something like a low blow that we see every MMA card and just gave it a whole new dimension in Washington, D.C. when Stefan Struve took a low blow from Ben Rothwell. You know what I'm talking about, right, Jordan?
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. That's a really good one. That was funny. That's a good one.
I mean, because what else can you really compare that with as far as interactions without maybe burning picks here, but that is interacting in real time. That's not just one interaction, one chant, sticking with it, and just being monotonous with it. They were having fun in there.
Yeah, so I think one thing that MMA crowds, one way in which MMA crowds differ from any other traditional American sport is that the crowd experience it's more like a party-ish, I guess. It reminds me way more of club football in Europe than it does of any other professional sport, because if you go to a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game, you never get that kind of stuff. But if you watch like Premier League soccer, like any of this European football, you'll hear that kind of stuff all the time. They're singing fun songs, they have cool chants, stuff like that. And I feel like that is way closer to what MMA fandom is, and maybe it's because MMA is such a global thing rather than where, not to say basketball isn't global or anything like that, but those are almost traditionally American sports at this point, with the highest levels being only here. But MMA, you've got fantastic martial artists all across the world, and maybe that's what it is. It contributes to more of a global type thing, but yeah, it almost reminds me more of like a big time European football match, but with the way that people are chanting and coming up with creative sayings, and then the crowd just gets into it like crazy.
That's totally true. Like, despite, the footage of between cameraman or crowd altercations of NBA players, like, diving into the crowd, really the worst the crowd does there is they do those stupid little, like, wacky inflatable, arm tube guy thing, like noodles behind the thing.
Sticks.
Yeah, to try to mess up the guy when they're shooting the free throw. Mm-hmm. Like, could you imagine someone busting those out at an MMA show, Jordan? Like, what are you doing, bro? And maybe he'll miss the punch.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Maybe he'll forget to duck.
The only person you'll be thrown off with, big colors in the audience is Matt Hamill. Didn't he used to go off like colored cue cards or something?
I believe so. Yeah.
I hope they got rid of that real fast. Hopefully that didn't go too long, because that's just.
That's wild. I'm sure they did. That is. I wonder if we'll ever have that type of situation in the UFC again, where a fighter has got some hearing impairment, so they have to come up with some other kind of thing besides like the clapper or the bell or whatever.
Yeah, it is interesting. But yeah, that is my number 5. Just kind of a silly one there, but it was unique, and I was having trouble deciphering these other ones, which I'll get into later. So let's get on to number 4, Jordan. All right. Stay at the steering wheel. What do you got, man?
So number 4, this is one that I was initially going to put way higher on my list, but then I saw the little interaction that I saw online with this, everyone had mentioned it. Plus, you used an image of it when promoting it, so I was like, well, I can't put this as like my number one or number two, even though it may be my favorite. Like just out of my heart, because it's the first time. Okay, so if you don't know what I'm talking about at this point, it's UFC 142 in Rio. Jose Aldo knocks out Chad Mendes right at the bell of round one, and then just books it out of the cage and jumps into the crowd. Gets hoisted up on shoulders. He's got the flag. Everyone's like chanting and singing, and it was an amazing scene to see. It's so cool, and it's honestly, I think it spawned some copycat-ishness after that. Like we've seen other people jump into the crowd. That was really the first one I can remember where someone like, and it really did seem unscripted and just totally 100% emotion. Like he was so hyped up in front of that huge Rio crowd. He gets the knockout after fighting off takedowns for like 3.5 minutes of that round. It seemed like yep. He was up against the cage working, and may have been some grabbing of the cage. Who knows? No one knows. But but that's a hard fought win, man. Like anyone who's ever done any kind of training knows. Avoiding takedowns for 3 minutes is extremely tiring, and then to get a knockout like that in a championship fight after all that grueling work, like that is extraordinarily rewarding in front of a home crowd. So he was amped up. He jumps into the crowd. It's a cool moment that felt very authentic. I feel like sometimes when people leave the cage and go to other things, not to step on any other picks, it sometimes can feel contrived and scripted, and like this one felt totally natural and authentic, and that's why I like it so much.
Absolutely, man. This was different than BJ's leaving the ring for Kyle Uno, because BJ just went backstage. But we saw people like even like Jose Aldo's Nova Niao counterpart. What's his name? He fights like once every 3 years.
Hakran Diaz?
No. He fought even back in Pride. He was the jiu-jitsu long, lanky guy. He knocked out Kevin Lee, and then he did the BJ Penn thing at UFC 194. Gosh, yes. I love how I remember like every other detail besides the guy's name.
I know I'll find it in a second.
I'll kill time, but yeah, you're right. And Jose Aldo, like he was the first to do that, and we would see other people try to imitate it, and not trying to hate, but like one of my favorites was I think it was Stevie Ray and Mafra. Mafra or whatever knocks him out in like Scotland. He hops the cage, right, and then goes into the crowd, and he gets the immediate people around him, like. They're not hoisting him up like Aldo by any means, but it's a good reaction, right? Like the people immediately around him, and then you hear Gooden go, "It's like Jose Aldo and Brandon Rio," and but then the cameraman does the ultimate disservice that right after the commentator does that, he's like, "Let me reinforce the commentator curse," and he like zooms out for a wider pan, and it just killed the shot because you saw everyone like just 2 layers around doing nothing, and you're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Leonardo Santos was the guy.
Leonardo, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Leonardo Santos, for saving the people like me who were probably on the other side of the podcast screaming at the microphone.
He was driving me crazy too. I had to look it up on my phone real quick. No, man, it's a good point, man, and it spawned lots of imitators, and it's just a cool moment that like. Kind of all the circumstances led to what happened being perfect, and I don't think you could recreate it if you tried.
100%, man. It's well deserving on the list. No shame on putting it on there. I didn't put it on mine probably because I ended up using it for the tweet. But like, let's be honest, it's got to be one of the first, if not the first, image that comes to your mind if someone batted this topic your way. All
Agreed.
Right. My number 4 also took place in Brazil, Jordan. Years later. We talked about the crowd going crazy in Brazil just now, but correct me if I'm wrong, silence is a reaction, right, Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think, we talked about Rogers Centers, and just because something's a record-breaking audience doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get on the list. As crazy as that what UFC 129 show was, spoiler alert, it could be deserved to be on your list. It's not on mine. I'll just step on that. To say that UFC 198 was a record-setting audience. I believe still in the top 3, if not top 5 for UFC all time. Yeah. And to hear that just go silent, I mean, Fabricio Verdum, it was a close fight. It was a heavyweight fight, but at the same time, especially if you're asking someone like me, I mean, Verdum was not getting his due. He submitted Fedor years before, and no one believed he was going to beat Kane. Except I was somebody shouting that he was a really bad matchup for him, and ended up being so. And if he beats Stipe, he pretty much cements himself as the greatest heavyweight, pretty much, because Stipe, look what he did. He ended up doing, getting the most title defenses ever at UFC level. Yeah. So it's just such a huge match, and of course we know what happens. Verdum gets tagged early, kind of has that Muay Thai sensibility where he's like, oh, I get tagged, I'm going to tag you back. Chases Stipe, gets knocked out off the back foot in a really crazy knockout, right, in that sense, and it's just silent, and I wrote in my notes here, I'm the world champ. I'm the world champ, because that's all you could hear Stipe as clear as day, because everybody was quiet. Yeah, I'm the world champ. Hey, brother.
Yeah.
You want hot dog skin and creaminess?
What's that?
Hey, brother.
No, man, that's a really good pick. Yeah. It's almost like I think the crowd was trying to process what happened, because that's what I was feeling too. It's like, why is he just sprinting at him? What's he doing? And then boom, he gets knocked out. You're like,
and remember the crowd, Fabricio Verdum went in his own pocket to like supply like 50,000 like of his own Fabricio Verdum Guy Fawkes masks. So you see everybody slowly putting them down, revealing sad faces like, oh, it's just so tough. I'm not trying to laugh. I was rooting for Verdum there, but I'm just saying it was such a crazy great moment. Like, holy shit.
No, you're right. You're very right. I forgot about the masks, actually. That's really funny to think about like that. But I think more than anything, it was just it was confusion, like I said, man. Like, because it was like, yeah, he got tagged early, and then it was just, I don't know if he was not all with it, or if it was just like you said, maybe that sense, that Muay Thai sensibility, where he's like, all right, I got to get you back. But he was literally just running with his hands down at Stipe, and I remember talking to my wife, who was not watching, just sitting next to me on her phone. I was like, what is he doing? And she's like, what? And then he got knocked out. I was like, what is he doing? And then I was just silent for a few seconds, and that's kind of what the crowd did. They were like, "What?" It was wild, man. That's a good one, because I don't think I ever would have thought about that, like using the silence as a reaction.
Yeah, maybe that should have been my hipster number 5 pick. I don't want to. Not to hint too much what my number 3 is, but I don't want to keep beating this topic to death. So why don't you stay with the steering wheel for number 3? Then we'll switch things up and for number 2 and 1.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let me get back here. My number 3 pick. All right, so this is another one, and maybe you're sensing a pattern here. What really gets me and gets my hackles up. My number 3 was the UFC's first venture to Liverpool, which was on May 27th of 18. The main event was Wonderboy Thompson against hometown kid Darren Till, right? And to quote Darren Till here, he thought this is their first time here. He wants the UFC to have a good time and Dana White to have a reason to come back. So for his intro song, instead of his normal "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins, which is a pretty good sleeper pick for walkout songs, by the way, but Darren Till chose instead to go with a much more upbeat, sing-songy, crowd chanting "Sweet Caroline" by Neil Diamond, and he walks out to Sweet Caroline, and everyone in that arena is singing Sweet Caroline. It was pretty freaking cool, man. And so my number 3 pick is when Darren Till comes out, his walkout with the entire crowd doing the Sweet Caroline, ba ba ba, which like everyone's at a Boston Red Sox game. It was crazy, but it was cool, man. That was another really good one that I think it was a cool crowd moment.
Definitely. In fact, that actually was my number 2, so I'm going to do a switcheroo here. And I'm going to switch my number 2 and 3 so I can join you on this one. So
right on, dude.
I'm totally with you. And I know people. So there's going to be people out there that are going to be in the camp of that. I hate that song. That's a bad song. Or I get that, that it was, it's funny because you're totally right. Because the setup to it was like Darren Till going, "You're going to hear Phil Collins drums at the Echo Arena. It'll be fucking great." And, like that's so there we go. It's by the way, those of y'all that like the weird voices on the Protect Your Neck podcast, y'all want me to do YouTube as well, and I'm trying to do that now. But just to let you know, there's probably going to be less of me doing impressions because I feel a lot more stupid doing them visually.
Oh, for sure.
But I can't help. Darren Till is part of my even when I leave like the house, I always tell my dogs, Jordan, I go, "It's okay, Tati be back." I always tell every time. But yeah, he's building it up, right? Like Phil Collins, the fucking drums, and he comes out to Sweet Caroline, and it's great because it takes you by surprise. Even though if you're familiar with whether Americans, you're familiar with the Boston Red Sox, or whether it's the 7th or 9th inning, whenever they do that. or obviously the soccer / football teams and that whole culture. You kind of touched on that and the similarities with that crowd before, right? And that's why it translates over so well. And yes, I know that now, Dana's probably going to do the thing to him like he did with Uriah, where Uriah's like, I actually wanted to stop coming out to Tupac like years ago, but I have to now, because it's just like Cowboy has to come out to Cowboy by Kid Rock. It's so it's going to be one of those things for Darren Till too. So it's never, in other words, it's never going to get better than this card and this moment that Jordan is picking there. So I will say that for the haters, because whether you like the song or not, the moment's just awesome. Especially my favorite part, Jordan, was the so good when he's getting patted down.
Personally, I don't love that song. It's nothing special to me, but the moment was awesome. And like, if you want to pick a sing-songy something to get the crowd into it, like that's a perfect one, because you don't have to sing the verse, even though that's like 6 words in the verse. Very easy. Everyone on earth knows the chorus, and if you don't, after you hear it the first time, you know it.
Yep, and I love that, like how like the Deathly Wake cut footage like got released shortly after that, which kind of makes it funny when, I don't know if you went back to rewatch this, I did, and I'm rewatching it going like, this guy was on like death's doorstep.
Yeah,
like not even 24 hours ago.
I know, that was a bad, that fight was in question. Like he was bad. Yeah, he
missed weight for that fight, and then I actually watched the post fight after and doing research here for this one. And he even gets a good crowd reaction for the, his post fight. That's where he's like, I forget, he's like midway answering a question. He's like, Stephen was good. But then all of a sudden he goes, come on, yes. And he starts like, and the crowd's like going with him though. But it was like weird. It was like, they told, like, he was sporadic and spazzy, but the crowd matched him. It was cool.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Scousers, man.
Crazy. Yeah, I love it. Oh, that was awesome. All right, well, let's do the Chinese fire drill now, since I burned what was originally my number 2, and I'll give what was originally number 3 as my now number 2. This one was kind of a general one. There was plenty of Brazil examples. We've already just burned 2, right, Jordan? And there's plenty of specific Brazil ones. And I'm not going to go, the Uva Mohe just in general, or the Brazil crowd in general, which is fine. It is worthy if you want to do that on the list, by the way. But one of mine is just, I remember when the UFC first started going back to Brazil, because if you remember, they were in Brazil before, the Ultimate Brazils, although they weren't as good. I think like Pat Miletich headlined one of those cards back in the day. Yeah. But like you got Bruce Buffer, which he might have even been there for those, but you definitely weren't getting the same reaction. And Bruce Buffer, one of his things is, it's time. And we've heard it through the golden age at this point. And at the very end of the proverbial golden age of the UFC, we're in Brazil, right? And I remember the first reactions there, just hearing the crowd, they would match Buffer. Do you remember? They would match his cadence.
Oh, yeah.
And the camera, and I love it because the production, it's like they would go to the outward mics and they would go to the outward shot, the master shot of the overhead arena, and you would just hear everybody go with, and you know that like there probably was no higher high in Buffer's life than just probably doing that for the first time. I would love to ask him that someday, but just the crowd just going in unison and adding that ominous effect like you're in the Church of Violence, and it was freaking awesome.
Yeah, that was probably like if it was Christmas in the house and his mom was like, I do love you more than Michael. I've never talked to Bruce, but I've always assumed that like what that has got to be the weirdest household to grow up in, like with these two people with these magnanimous voices that like and Michael gets all this notoriety first, and then Bruce has had the staying power. But like I've always thought, like I wonder if he's like, do you love me yet, mommy?
God, again, I'm drawing blanks, but something else I wanted to bring up to you, and this was another perfect example of it. But that's like, you could tell me and Jordan folks grew up in like the Simpsons era / family, beginning of Family Guy stuff, because that's a total Simpsons. That was a total Simpsons joke right there. That was one of those total like side like those little body shots of a joke that are just at that another level that they were giving you in that layered performance that was the Simpsons in their golden years.
But in all seriousness, that is a very good pick, Dan. Like, it's still like, even watching it now, when you get a big fight with a big hype around it with a big crowd, that still kicks in with it. It still kind of it still works. Like, don't fix it, don't fix what's not broke. So, that's a good one, man. I didn't even think about something like that too, and now I'm realizing how big this topic is, because it's like, I feel like I might have scoped in on one tiny aspect of what crowd reactions are. And like, it's easy to do because like now I'm like, oh man, that's a good idea. I didn't even think about that.
And just to pause for a second, we probably should have done, I should have done a better job of setting this up as we just kind of, again, we're so comfortable with each other, we're kind of shooting the shit. But like we said, the reason why it's strange times, so we're going to be bringing you these top 5 shows, and again, it's kind of self-serving because it actually helps us, folks. It gives us content and things to do as well. But I bring that up again because we're talking about crowd reactions here, and I don't know if you're getting this, Jordan, but not even just for researching this topic. Like, I'm doing this other thing that I'm going to be dropping on Twitter. I'm just kind of reiterate a half guard list. So I'm going through some footage, just old footage in general, right? And every time they do cutaways to the crowd, like, it gives me a different feeling now and we're not even that deep into this self-quarantine. We're not on official lockdowns depending on what state or what country you're in. U.S. is sadly not as enforcing it as other places, let's just say, although we're hopefully getting better there. But we're not even that deep into it, essentially. And when I see crowds congregate even just on... I don't want to use the word nostalgia if that's too strong, but it's striking weird chords with me, Jordan. Am I crazy here?
No, same thing, man. Like I was watching a movie last night, and like there was a scene where a guy was on a train or like a bus or a train or something or a subway, and like they were all packed in, and I was like, ugh, there's germs everywhere.
Yes,
get away.
Right,
You're gonna get stuff. Like
right.
It's just stuff that, like, looking back at it now, you're like obviously there are things that we have to do in life to get, like, if you've got to get to work by the subway or by the bus or whatever, you're going to have to be around the public. But like looking at it now, you're like, oh man, we are filthy people and we are so close to each other all the time. And like, it's a wonder that this type of thing hasn't happened since, the early 1900s. It's kind of crazy that it has. And obviously I hope everyone listening to this is staying safe and doing everything you can to keep you and yours safe. But like, it's wild, man. And it's scary. And the scary thing is that some people aren't taking this as seriously as they need to, but that's neither here nor there.
Absolutely. And just to retether it back to, or keep it tethered, I should say, to MMA, is that on that note, like, yeah, we're not to timestamp it too much, but the talk is, how are they gonna, UFC's gonna pull up their next scheduled event, which, as of this podcast, is UFC 249, and obviously the crowds are the biggest question. The last card the UFC officially did, UFC Brasilia, went down with no crowds. So again, tethered into this kind of conversation and topic we're tackling here on this show, it's just so weird because you're right, there's that side of it, right? Like, I used to live in Brooklyn and work in Manhattan, so I was taking the train back and forth every day, and we've seen the exposure rates as New York is the epicenter, at least for the United States, and pretty high in the world rankings. But on the other side of it, back to the crowds, I dare say the positive side of it, Jordan, which is kind of, a double-edged sword, as are a lot of things right now. But, I'm looking at these, like, record-setting crowds, and these crowds just in joy, and like my number one when we get to it, like, because there's video footage of it, and some video footage that I even took of it, if that kind of gives you a hint what my number one will be. And you just see people embracing each other, hugging. Like, those are just the craziest crowd moments. And I'm watching these, and I'm like, when are we getting back to this? And even like thinking positively, I'm like, man, it's gonna be so powerful. To end this thought, I guess, on a positive note, I mean, it's powerful for me to go back and watch some of these crowd reactions, right? Tying it to the episode, but like, how powerful is it gonna be when we get back to that point eventually? You know what I'm saying? Is it gonna mean that much more to us? I hope it does. But like,
yeah, I think like you said, it's going to be a double-edged sword where it's going to be, we're not going to take being able to be close to our friends and families for granted anymore, but it's also going to be the type of thing where it's like, we know more now, and we know, like, it's always going to scare us. It's going to be like, is something else going to happen? Is this going to happen again, type of thing? But, hopefully more than anything, it just makes us aware of what we have and to, treat it as such and not take anything for granted. But yeah, man.
Absolutely, and hopefully that didn't put a dark tinge in the topic, but more just rooted it to the ground and made it more rich, because it really, there's a lot more legs to do in this topic right now than if we did it last year, right, Jordan?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So on that note, I guess we're at number one, right? You just gave me your number two, or no? You're still in number two. Number two.
Yeah, I haven't done my two yet.
All right.
Which I just did a last minute swaparoo here for it. So I'm taking what I had as two out and putting it in honorable mentions, because I just remembered one. So I don't remember the entire backstory, and if you remember it, maybe you can fill in a little bit. But it's UFC 120, and the fight is Condit versus Hardy, right? And so in the front row of that, like there's celebs that go to all these fights, right? There's always celebs at these fights, especially when they're big ones. In the front row of this fight, there were three celebrities all sitting together because they had just got done filming a movie or were currently filming a movie, right? So it's Jude Law, Robert Downey Jr., and Guy Ritchie. They're filming one of the Sherlock Holmes movies. They're right there. Was that fight in England? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, there you go. So it's in England. They're filming that movie there. You got two Brits and an American, and I believe, well, obviously, I think Guy Ritchie and Jude Law were probably rooting for Dan Hardy as the Englishman, and Downey Jr. as the American was probably rooting for Condit, because when the knockout eventually happens and Condit lands that huge left hook, Hardy goes down. The first person to jump out of their seat in the entire arena is Robert Downey Jr., and there's a still frame if you Google image like RDJ UFC 120, there's an image of everyone sitting down. Condit has just landed that big clean left hook, and Hardy's on his way down, and Robert Downey Jr. is already out of his chair with his hands up in the air like that because he knows that it's one. And it was such a cool reaction because it was a little silent, a little crazy, but it was really, really cool, man, to see the first guy to lose his shit over that knockout was Robert Downey Jr.
Dude, that is a great one. I totally forgot those guys were in attendance, and I didn't even realize that whole the reaction part of it. And that's pretty insane, especially now how many interviews later has Downey Jr. I don't know if he's one of the Endeavor people or not celebs, but he how many shows and interviews as he references his fandom and for martial arts.
Yeah,
and that's crazy. I didn't even realize that. Wow.
Yeah, I totally forgot about it
man.
until we were talking, and something reminded me of it, and I was like, I wonder which one. And so I kind of got that one out. And it's a unique one. It's a very individualistic one, but it's still a crowd race.
It's a great fight too. It was one of my things, like canaries in the coal mine, as far as breaking down fights, where like when a fighter goes for the title and fails, regardless if it's justified or not, there seems to be a lot of inflation in their next fight. Like they're in other words, their skills are overestimated by odds makers. Let's just say, to be fair. Yeah. And you had that vibe. You're like, man, GSP couldn't submit him for 5 rounds. Let's see what Hardy can do now. He's still young. Oh, he's got to be hungry now. And then you have Condit, who comes in, like, the only forgivable time, in my opinion, that he doesn't come into Rage Against the Machine. He comes in, do you remember the Jimi Hendrix electric guitar national anthem?
Yeah.
And that was just so badass. Like an FU, and that wasn't, and it was not like, Carlos Condit's like some Colby Covington guy who was like trying to get pop from the crowd with the American flag. Like, it, and it made it that much more genuine. Like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was on foreign soil. He was proud of where he came from or whatever. And like, I think it was, he wasn't being a heel like a Covington or whatever. I think if anyone who's ever met Carlos Condit knows he's about the farthest thing in the world from being like a heel or a bad dude. But like, yeah, man, that was that not only was it was a really hyped up fight, but I had forgotten about the kind of individual nature of that. And I remember I think Downey doing an interview afterwards, and they said they might have had some money on it, him and those guys. So
wow.
it's a cool image. I suggest everyone
cool.
go if you haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because literally everyone in the crowd sitting down, kind of processing what's happening. Downey's jumping out of his chair, hands in the air. It's a cool picture.
That's awesome, man. All right, folks. Number one time we are here. Kind of hinted it. I got video of this myself. I was watching this fight, the main event, and I felt like the finish was coming soon. So I did one of those Instagram stories where it lets you record, and I don't know how long it takes for it to get to the full circle before it extends into another video. But it was just about the right time for one video, and I got the finish. Mike Beltran pulling Alimale McFarlane off of Valerie Letourneau. And the Blaisdell Arena in Honolulu, Hawaii was the Bellator's first trip there. Big MMA show, first trip back since like the Elite XC days. And it was great. You had the Hawaiian flags in the air, the audience going crazy, kind of like what I said. You saw people like hugging and kissing and embracing each other, like kind of like in a movie. Like you would see like people overacting, like extras. Like, but it wasn't a movie, obviously, so it wasn't overacting. It was genuine. And to feel those things, in person and feel that bias, and again, it probably wasn't, even half as loud if you supplant me in the Bell Center for GSP Sarah 2, right,
sure.
Jordan?
Yeah.
But the fact that I still felt that aura and the stomping and the chanting within a small arena, and it felt full. As soon as, you look at the early rounds of that fight, it ends in round 4, but as soon as round 1 and round 2, when Alimale is getting vowed to the ground for the first time, you just, similar to the South Korea, feel that I got through the broadcast of just the bass of the people chanting and stomping as they chanting. There's something about the stomping and chanting when a group of cultural people for their cultural brethren. It's something extra powerful when you add those cultural points and the stomping and the whatever they're saying in their native, tongue. And Alimale, of course, was able to incite the crowd even before then with just her walkouts for both times. So that's my number 1.
That's a great pick, man. I was wondering if you were gonna use that one because I knew that you were there, and it's definitely one that I thought about because it's got that emotional component. Anytime that there is somebody who's fighting on their home soil, I feel like that is it's powerful, and it can be powerful in multiple ways, like the GSP one where it's just the mass amount of people, or it's the Till one where it's like, he's trying to make sure that this is like a fun, raucous experience, or like Alima May, like you said, where it's like it's culturally significant. This is something that's a big deal, not just for Bellator or for her, but for MMA in general. Like, we don't get a lot of big time MMA shows in Hawaii, and that's if we're ever going like if we ever have a countdown someday that's like anything that you wish could happen, like your dream scenarios that never came true, is a huge UFC card with BJ Penn headlining in Hawaii. That's like my number 1 that I would, if that would have happened, that would have been my number 1 reaction. Right. I could guarantee it already.
Totally.
So it's hugely significant, not just for her, not just for the sport, not just for this promotion, but for MMA and the Hawaiian people in general. So
awesome. Yeah, I had to go kind of biased there. That was probably predictable for a lot of y'all listeners of the Protect Your Neck podcast. But Jordan, I'm anxious to know, man, what did you get for your number 1?
So my number 1 is the only time I can ever remember a crowd reaction making like headlines outside of just MMA communities. And it was like the number 1 post on all of Reddit when it happened, or like when it came out, and like they were writing news articles about it. Like, look how cool this is, because there was camera footage from inside the arena. And it kind of falls in line with a couple of my other picks too. It's a fighter fighting in their hometown with a really, really powerful walkout. And it's that's Aisling Daly walking out to Zombie in Dublin, where the crowd is all singing Zombie by the Cranberries, and like it is a crazy moment when every single person in there is singing that whole thing, and she's pretty calm and she walks out and she's kind of singing along too. But man, that thing exploded. I want to say that video has millions and millions of hits on it. Like, it was shared on like major news sites, and like I said, it was like the number 1 post on Reddit for a day, which is crazy for anything MMA related to beat out like what's happening in politics or the biggest movies of the day. Like, so it's wild. I think just significance wise that it reached outside people who would normally see that type of thing. So it's the biggest one I can think just kind of culturally. So that was my number 1. It was an easy pick for me for the number 1.
That's awesome, man. And this was the second Dublin show, correct?
Yeah, second Dublin show.
Yeah, the Poirier Duffy one that got Knicks. That's such an awesome pick. And just to piggyback on that, I really enjoy the crowd sing-along moments too. They had a special part with me, being that, I used to be in a hardcore band and really love punk hardcore. Now, punk hardcore is not a lot, beyond like traditional street punk of 3 chords. There's maybe a little more of that. It got metallic back in the day. But one of the key components, whether you're talking about metalcore or more punk hardcore, youthcore, this type of music, was the crowd interaction. Whether you're talking about the early days from the Bad Brains and Henry Rollins in the 80s, right? The kids just smash dancing, to the days I came up more in the late 90s, early 2000s. And what I just loved is like, and the thing I tell people, I'll be like, this does not sound like this guy is screaming and yelling. And I'm like, well, I'm a weird high energy kind of guy, so I dig that aspect. But I would always give this example. Like, Rolling Stones are great. I'm a big fan of the Rolling Stones, but like, you don't really see Mick Jagger handing off the mic to an audience member.
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe if the crowd is just right, or certain footage, I'm sure he might do the thing where he does the general, sure, puts the mic out. But I guarantee you he's not doing it at the cost of any of his singing parts. He's doing it in already established chorus parts. There's a lot of selfishness in even the best rock and roll, in other words. And when you can share with the crowd, it makes the experience, it makes the song, it makes your experience as somebody there for the show 10x better, and it's something I tried to explain to people. So just imagine somebody tuning in, like you said, it was trending on Reddit, this walkout with Ashlyn Daly and whatnot. Like, even if they're not a big MMA fan, like,
exactly.
Look how batshit crazy these people are getting in unison for some kind of, this is special.
Right, 20,000 people singing along as a fighter in their, a hometown girl is coming out. And also, I think I don't think we should gloss over the fact that it's a woman that this is happening for. This is one of the biggest pops that I've ever seen for a female fighter coming out. And I mean, Ronda had some huge ones. Holly had a couple big ones. Nunez is getting their Cyborg maybe, but like Ashley Daly, a competent long-term fighter, someone who had been in the game a long time. I think she's since retired, but she wasn't necessarily fighting for titles. She was a middle of the card performer, and she gets the biggest reaction of the night, with everyone singing this song. Cranberries, who are an Irish band as well. I think it's kind of another layer kind of on top of it. So
cultural.
And yeah, it's cultural, man, and that's significant for them, because up to that point there hadn't been a lot of major promotions in Ireland. Maybe Cage Warriors had done some stuff over there, that type of stuff. But you get the second ever UFC show over there. That's big stuff. And obviously since it's gotten over there more. But just to touch on what you were saying, Dan, man, some of those basement shows where the mic gets passed to the crowd and you got people running up on stage, and you're like, that guy's not in the band. Like, who is that? Like,
yes.
That's cool though, man, because it makes you feel like you own it. Like it's your art too. It's not just somebody who's created it. And I think that's like, as someone who's made that type of art in the past, like that's, I think, the biggest compliment, that something you make, someone can take and feel like it's their own. And that's, so that speaks so much to that experience. So that's a good way to kind of keep it all together.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of people who have the similar interests as us can make that can see that analogy quite well. So thanks. But let's on that note, let's go to the listener list before we get out of here with honorable mentions. Let's give them first stab at it, okay? And I'm glad, by the way, last thing, we totally unplanned, but both me and Jordan's number one crowd reactions were based on ladies.
Yeah, man,
pretty freaking cool.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have expected that.
Nope.
Going into this.
No, not at all.
All right, let's go. Let's give Brad Chuck first dibs again. At Brad's Chuck. Brad, of course, member of the MMA Analysis Podcast. He gave us his topic. He also gave us a list, and his list kicked my list's ass. First, I don't think he didn't put a number on it, but the first one, this is one that probably I was like, this was the hardest one where I'm like, oh, I want to steal this one. Oh, I want to steal it on my list, because it should be on my list too. I feel like it definitely would if I was there live. But it was when Big Nog probably should have retired after KOing Brendan Schaub at UFC 134.
I thought about that one too, man. Yeah, that was a wild one.
When people were crying in the audience, that thing. Speaking of Dublin shows and crowd reactions, and when there's culture, cultural aspects to it. But Conor Brandao finished UFC Dublin.
Yep, it's
a great one, great show.
Yep.
I haven't seen this one in a long time, so Jordan, feel free to weigh in. But Brad has Hidehiko Yoshida's first takedown against Vanderlei Silva at Pride Final Conflict 03.
Whoa, that is a blast.
I know it was a shocker, but like I don't remember it's been forever if I watched. I'd be lying if I remember.
No, yeah, I don't remember it either, because it's probably been a decade since I watched that fight, so I would have to go through and watch it again.
This one I've watched a lot of times just over the course of the years, because it's one of my favorite events, like I was saying on Twitter the other day, which was the 2000 GP Final of Pride, where Mark Coleman wins. But there was also a grudge match or whatever, if you will, when Sakuraba was taking on the Gracies, and of course that night he took on Hoist, and when Hoist's corner threw in the towel, oh my goodness, that was a big deal. That was a big, and again, speaking of silence as a reaction, we all know from Tyson being upset in the early 90s to Japanese MMA, the Japanese crowd, not that loud, right? I mean, they went bananas. They knew the significance of what that meant. And the Gracies, for whatever criticisms of matchmaking and you want to say, right, that goes along with the legacy as well. Watching Helio, the grandpa, take it in stride and take it in class and take it in most stride than the whole family was really cool. And just watching Sakuraba reach through the ropes to pay his respects to Helio after that was just awesome.
He made him say Mute.
He said yes. All right. Great reference there. Oh man. Oh, great reference there. By the way, you'll have to maybe give your martial arts movie a reference for quarantine at the end here on the way out. And then the last one on his list, he had Randy Rock and Tim Sylvia, UFC 67. That was a great one for me as well.
Yep. Yeah. That's a very good one.
His honorable mention was GSP Sarah 2, which you already covered, but that's what I was hinting at earlier.
Yeah, that is a good one. So my number 2 that I kicked off was just to get that Robert Downey Jr. one in there was the Masvidal Askren KO, because it happened so fast that I think the crowd just didn't know what the fuck happened. Like they were still hyped up from the bell ringing, from like the beginning of the fight that it was over, and people were. I think it took like longer than the fight took for people to understand what had happened and kind of process what was going on. So
right.
that was an interesting one.
No, totally. Yep. Fire off your honorable mentions right now. We'll get those in and we'll get on out of here.
All right, yeah, this is one that I didn't put on my list because I didn't know if it counted, but how about Conor taking Aldo's belt at the press conference?
Oh yeah, that's right. That was huge. Yeah, people did.
It wasn't technically a fight, but when he reaches over and takes that belt, he says, "Give me my belt," and like, dude, that place lost it. Nice. Holly knocking out Ronda. Nice. That was a big one.
Check that one off. That's yep. I had that honorable mention. Yep.
Comeback finish when Congo, who was knocked out, came back and knocked out Pat Barry. That was a wild sound because there was like 30 seconds where the crowd was going, "Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like it's just like, what is gonna happen? Because this guy's knocked out, and he's up. And he's getting punched more. He's going to get knocked out. Then he knocks out the other guy. That they didn't know what the fuck to do. That was wild. That's like when you go in your backyard and you're like, "Oh, I found $5," and then you go to pick it up, and underneath there's $20. And you're like, "What?" And then you pick up the $20, and there's $50. And then you pick up the $50, and it's a Nintendo 64, and you're like, "What?" So.
Well, dude, that exchange will never get old. Like, how does that age poorly? How?
It's wild.
How?
It's insane. And you keep watching. You're like, how did that happen? It's insane.
Hey, real quick, I just want to say, Holmes KO Rousey would have been worthy on anyone's list because that's one of those finishes in MMA. It's like when Kennedy got shot. Like everybody remembers where they were.
Oh yeah. I wasn't watching it.
Oh,
okay.
Have I heard that
story? I wasn't there. Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, I didn't get to see it live because I had a charity event, like a black tie charity event.
Yeah, that's right. I remember this. I'm
sitting, like watching my phone, and like I'm getting so many texts and so many messages from everybody, and I'm like, "Motherfucker, something cool happened! God damn it, motherfucker!"
Holy shit!
So I had to run home, and I had like DVR'd it or whatever, and so like I go through, I'm watching, I'm like, "Ah!" But my last honorable mention was Gonzaga knocking out Crow Cop at Fight Night 64.
Oh, that's a good knockout. That was a great knockout. And I don't remember the reaction because I just think about the knockout. But yeah, and I will say, hey, pop trivia. I think that was the first podcast breakdown podcast me and Jordan ever did was for MMA latest breakdown of UFC 193.
Yeah,
so, and I remember you saying you had the kind of a bitterness of breaking down the card because you weren't going to watch it live. So now it's coming back to me.
Yeah, man, it was a bummer, awesome. But yeah. This is a fun one.
All right, I'm going to run through my list real quick, which is Matt Brown entrance at UFC 198 when he was when he had to fight the crowd. Paul Buentello, early UFC. Don't fear me. That goes into no reaction when the crowd left him hanging.
Yeah.
Trying to cut like an old school WWF promo there.
Yeah, I remember.
This one. Dude, correct me if I'm wrong. Speaking of giving MMA analysis a lot of shouts, but I believe one of those guys was in the audience and was one of the Boo Birds who booed Al Iaquinta and actually got a reaction from Al. Yeah.
Fuck you.
You booed me? That could have been on anybody's list for it. Another Stipe one at UFC 203. OH!
Yeah.
OH!
OH! OH! By the way, booed. Not to boo Al, but he didn't win that fight.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, how much does Stipe do the Nick Nolte smoothie routine? Like, instead of kale, he puts gravel and rocks.
He eats rocks in his omelets.
Stipe stole my recipe for a gravel smoothie.
We've been talking for an hour, Dan. I just realized my daughter has all her stuffed animals up behind me.
I was looking at that.
Like an asshole with like Where the Wild Things Are guy right here.
I was looking at that. I think everybody's going to be forgivable under the circumstances. UFC Mexico City, Yair Jeremy. That was like classic boxing there when you see them do that in boxing. Just Bleed guy. I mean, that counts as a crowd reaction. Yep. And then I put Tyron Woodley's mom for the Mark Quart KO because remember they were brutally like doing they included Woodley in the in between round Woodley's mom in the in between round highlight package, and they're showing her jumping like Tyron, get him, and then like it was the beginning of that round he gets KO'd and like
he gets Tekken comboed,
and she's like right behind the broadcast booth, and like you could see her too. Like I felt so bad. I was like that was tough. And last one was no, we already covered that. Big Nog in Brazil. Yep, those are the honorable mentions. That was
some
fun.
good ones on there, man. Yeah, that was a good one. That was a fun one.
That was fun. We ran it. Not too bad because Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong. We usually run like 2 hours. You know what I'm saying? So this is actually pretty good. I'd say
this is a land speed record for us. We're usually talking. We didn't go on a 40-minute Japanese MMA diatribe, so it was good.
Someone say Takeya Mitsugaki? Oh,
did you say Omigawa?
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh yeah. So no. I've already been on a WEC and then Japanese MMA run. There. Anything you want to say while we're getting out before we get out of here, Jordan?
The only thing I would say, man, is just be nice to each other. And if you can, I know times are tough for a lot of people, but if you can, now is a really good time to, even if you can't go out to get dinner somewhere, but buy a gift card from a local restaurant that is probably getting screwed pretty hard. And Dan, I don't know if this is something that's close to you, but I would assume it is. But I know especially there's a lot of unfounded racism going on right now towards Asian Americans, and so if you've got a local Thai place or a Chinese place or a Japanese place that you would like to see stay open through all of this, buy a gift card, do what you can to keep those type of places alive.
I appreciate that, and to be honest, I think that's again, it's weird to say good thing and a bad thing, but I think that's the one good thing about this becoming a worldwide issue is that now I think that even those people are kind of past it, like, oh yeah, it's kind of futile, it's kind of an every person problem. And I do second that too. Again, I'm more on the side of not to get political, but I'm more on the side of playing it safe. For example, when it comes to addressing this. Yep. That being said, that doesn't mean that I'm numb. Like I said with the UFC, even though I laid out on the last episode. By the way, thank you guys for subscribing to the YouTube channel. I guess I got to get to like a certain amount of subscribers before I can even have like a go visit me at YouTube / Dan Like it won't let me do that. It's just YouTube. So just search Daniel Tom or go to at Dan Tom MMA and all the links are there. Thank you guys for those of you watching the first top 5 show on this format. But back to the sad stuff. No, I'm just kidding. No. But like that is one thing though is even though I'm on the side of playing things safe, obviously there's nothing more I would want than UFC fights to watch right now, right? And back to the restaurant note, which I totally agree with it. Again, even though I'm on the side of playing things safe, that doesn't mean I'm numb to what this is going to do to our economy, both in the U.S. and worldwide economy. As we're all finding out, we're tethered a lot closer than we think we are, and we realize it. So I totally, support that because it's been depressing. I've been trying to stay in as most I can to protect. Obviously, I'm taking care of 3 now down to 2. I didn't mention this off the top of the show. I told Jordan I actually lost my. I'm keeping people up to date. It was expected. He was in hospice care. He held on way longer than he should have. But my grandfather actually passed away in the middle of the night, the day we were recording this. So this was. I definitely been trying to play it safe, but it's depressing to see what it's doing to everybody. And this was hopefully it was a good distraction to you listeners as it was for me, and hopefully it was for you too, Jordan, a distraction. Because again, we're all. It sounds cheeky, but we all are in this together. We're all going through different things. We're all different people in different parts of the world. Not everything's the same, but that doesn't mean we're not all going through adversity together. And yeah, so to lastly, with the first thing you said, to tie this off, Jordan, which was be kind. Man, be kind to people right now, because whether you're going through basic stuff, because life doesn't stop as far as, basic things are happening from like, we're losing relatives or this or that to the adversity that we're all going through. It's probably not a bad idea, like Jordan said, to probably be kind to each other and at least to your friends and loved ones, check in on them. And this is very real. This is a time where we all need some mental health support, even those us who never had any kind of issues or anything like that. Like this is time where we all got to be strong for each other, man. Be kind.
Yep, agreed.
All right, sorry to get deep and preachy there, but again, we're going to be coming with these top 5 shows that are MMA related to kind of help with the distractions. Thank you again, Jordan, for joining me and helping us kick this off. We're definitely going to have you back again sooner than later. And thank you guys all for listening. And until next time, protect your neck.